Heritage, practical karate instructor from the Cotswolds.
And I am Patrick Woodward, amateur enthusiast and practitioner in a number of different martial arts styles.
And welcome to the Armchair Combatives podcast. Hello again.
Hello again, my man. So, I want to maybe talk about something a little bit different today.
Okay.
You have just run, by the sounds of it, a very successful women's self-defense seminar for members of the club and for outside participants. And I would just be really keen to know, and I think the listeners at home might also be keen to know, the findings you found just based on the research you had to do, because I'm aware that you have put a lot of time and effort into this, not just on the level of physical skills, but you also did a lot of research into statistics and different organizations that assist with women's health and self-defense. So yeah, I'm really just keen to turn it over to you and just hear about a few of the points you found whilst you were getting this seminar together.
It was a really interesting event actually. Like you said, it was the first time that I've ever done this. Obviously you've known for a while now, Pat, but I try and focus a lot on some of the self-defense aspects in the club. And I think one of the biggest issues that we come across as instructors, especially if you come from a martial art background, is that any sort of self-defense that we teach is based around the martial art in which you're teaching. And I think that is problematic on so many levels, because if that was the case, then self-defense is going to look different all depending on who you train with. It could be like a judo guy is going to teach you how to throw people. A Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy is going to teach you how to pin people or submit people. And you can see why there is so much interpretation left in any form of self-defense. And I think the problem is that you need to almost take a step back from being a martial artist and go, no, that's not the important thing. I'm not coming in here to teach karate and then try and make it fit the self-defense narrative. I'm going to go, right, let's look at the self-defense stuff, and what fits, what doesn't, we completely disregard. So as a kind of a starting point then, like you said, like statistics was a really important thing to start with. Now, speaking to people and, as in like friends of mine that are women, you will know too many stories of people that they know or themselves have been sexually harassed, sexually assaulted in some way, whether it's from somebody they know, whether it's somebody in their life that was like, just a friend and they took it too far and they've had to like ruin that relationship with that person because of it. And I think that's where you always need to start with women's self-protection, is understanding the needs of women and understanding the unique challenges that they have that are different to that of men. So that was one of the first things that I kind of started looking at, is like, what sort of crimes are women more likely to experience? And I think the first thing that is massively noticeable is most crimes that are more common in women are usually sexually driven, especially at the ages between kind of like 16 to like 35. So, the kind of age where you're more likely to be socializing with bigger groups of people, you're more likely to be going out on a regular basis, you're more likely to be in contact with alcohol regularly and in places where alcohol is readily available. So therefore, you end up with these kind of like more sexually driven crimes. And because of that, I think you need to understand that, first of all, if you understand what women are facing, then it's more likely that you can come up with solutions that are generally suitable. So kind of throwing this to you then, Pat, just because, this is something that I haven't done a lot with you, because obviously being a guy, we don't do a lot of women's self-protection with you, funnily enough. But based on your preconceptions of like women's self-protection, what sort of things would you like throw into the ring which you would automatically spring to mind when it came down to teaching self-defense for women? So I'd be interested to see your point of view with this.
So I did have a friend of mine actually recently reach out to me, a male friend. He reached out to me and he said, my partner actually had a really quite nerve-wracking experience at a bus stop. And basically the situation was, like, this guy wasn't doing anything I would necessarily categorize as openly threatening. But basically she was standing at the bus stop waiting for the bus, and this guy came and stood kind of like right next to her, quite close. She kind of shuffled away, he shuffled a bit further, and basically like this guy wouldn't kind of leave her alone. He wasn't engaging with her in any way on a verbal level, but on this kind of social level, he was just very much threatening her with just his presence. And by the sounds of it, she just kind of, she got onto the bus, she sat next to somebody who was already there, so he couldn't sit, anywhere near her. And she made sure she didn't get off at her exact stop, which I thought is very clever, but at the same time, it's a real shame she's kind of had to resort to these methods just because of one man. And so when I did see them, I was kind of saying, like, it's really difficult because women's self-defense that I've seen online or people have kind of talked to me about, in the sense of like, oh, this is the surefire way to evade an attacker, and it seems to just kind of sit on these weird two sides of the spectrum, because you have one instance where it's just like, oh, as long as you've got your soft skills, you'll never need to use your physical ones, because you can do this, you can use your avoidance, you can use your adder ladder, you can do this, you can do that, and it's kind of like, that is almost true, I would say. Like, yes, if you have a really well practiced set of soft skills, you have your avoidance, you have your awareness, you make sure you're focusing on your adder ladder, you make sure you're always understanding where exit points and safe points in public are, you make sure you're never traveling alone, or if you are traveling alone, it's a route is going to be publicized, you're not taking any silly shortcuts down dark alleyways or anything like that. That's great, but the whole reason we engage in self-protection is because we know that one day the soft skills might fail. And so to say that the soft skills will always get you out of trouble, I think it is an almost kind of dangerous fallacy. On the other hand, you see these things which are just like, oh, well, unfortunately, female presenting people are smaller and slighter than your average male attacker. So as soon as somebody assaults you, you need to take your nails and immediately gouge out his eyes, and then you need to immediately absolutely demolish his testicles with several knees, and then you need to make sure you stamp on his windpipe several times so that he doesn't feel the need to get up and follow you. And it's like, that is going to be really easily twisted by the wrong person if and when that kind of attack enters the legal system. So there has to be.
I totally agree with
so
that.
there has to be, because it's kind of like, because it's a really, really horrible thing, but we all know that there are court systems out there where a man will turn up and he's had his eyes torn up and he's had his throat gouged out and all of that crap, and he will be able to turn on a sob story and he'll go like, oh no, I was just trying to be friendly, I was just doing this, I wasn't being threatening. And because he's the one covered in bruises and scratches and all of that, the wrong person will look at that and go like, well, he's clearly in the right. And unfortunately, it means that this woman who very nearly suffered a much worse form of assault, I know it's really difficult to quantify, but I think you know what I'm alluding to, Jack. It's one of those where she almost suffered something much worse at the hands of this man, and she will now get punished because she defended herself. And so I really took effort. Yeah, so I was kind of really focusing on like, the soft skills are 98% of what you should be practicing. Because I mean, if you take it back to the bus stop routine, I was like, okay, let's run it. And I was like, I said to a boyfriend who's my friend, I said, okay, you pretend to be the assailant, and I'll pretend to be you. I'll pretend to be the person who's the victim in this scenario, and I'll show you how I do it. And it was just the first thing that came to my head was like, the guy comes out and stands next to me. So I moved away. So he kind of moves in again. So I sneezed on him. And I start doing this whole thing of like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Oh, your shirt. Oh, and I kind of go, oh, miss, I'm really sorry. Have you got a tissue or anything I can use? I've just sneezed on this poor guy. And it's like, you make it so that he is in no way being attacked. He's in no way being threatened, but he's 100% now the center of attention. Get other people involved. Miss, I'm really sorry. I haven't got any tissues on me and I've just sneezed on this poor guy. Oh, I feel awful. And you make this whole thing of like, this was just a really unfortunate accident. It's hay. It's about 25 degrees outside where I am now. It's hay fever season. I sneezed on the guy. My allergies acted up. I'm really sorry. And now he's not being threatened. He's not being attacked. He has no grounds to kind of twist anything around and go like, oh, well, I was just standing at the bus stop and this woman attacked me. But at the same time, now everybody is looking at him. Everybody is like, this is he's the center of this situation that's developed, and it's not one of assault and it's not one of threat, but it's one of, he's so in focus. Because, oh my God, that woman just sneezed on this poor guy. Oh, somebody get him a towel. Has anyone got a spare t-shirt that's talking about? That's awful. And it's like, and now there's no grounds for him to feel like he can escalate. There's no grounds for him to feel like he can continue. But
so I really like that as a principle, Pat.
Yeah.
Sorry, but that's really good. I like the idea of making that person like the centre, just because what you're going to end up having from that is better witness perception recall if something was to happen, because now you have made sure that people have looked at this person and they can identify him. Like you've also said, I think bringing in other people into those situations is quite good as well. But I think one of the most important things that you've touched on there was you were looking at it from a law perspective, and that is exactly what we should be doing in a self-defense scenario. It's very, very, and this is a quote that gets thrown around a lot, but it's like, it's better to be judged by what, I can't remember the exact, you know the quote, don't you, Pat? It's better to be judged by 6 than carried by 7, or something along those lines.
Oh, it's better to be.
Do whatever you want in self-protection.
Yeah, the quote is, it's better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6.
Sorry, that's the one.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's the one.
And that's very much the argument of like, it would be better to. I mean, that's very much, I've said something similar where it's just like, if it truly comes down to life or death, I'd rather see someone I know enter the court system than be in the morgue or the hospital kind of thing.
So I agree with that if it is a life or death situation. If we're talking about this is like a knife attack and this person has the kind of like agency to try and kill you, and that is their goal, they are trying to kill you, that is totally different. However, I think sometimes people spin that and make it like any sort of self-defense situation, you can do whatever you want and legally you'll be going to be okay. And it's like, well, no, you're not, because that's not how self-defense works, and that's not how the law works surrounding self-defense. So I think you bringing up the idea of being aware of the law is probably one of the most important things to kind of think about and consider before we even look at any self-defense skills, any hard skills especially, because proportionality and reasonable response are kind of like the two key things that go into whether what you're doing is suitable or not, and whether you're going to be judged by the law fairly, or whether you're going to be looked at as, oh no, actually no, this person is the attacker in this situation, no, look at what they did. So it's one of those things, like you said, you mentioned about like using nails and biting and all that kind of stuff. So that is genuinely a really good thing to do. However, that has to come in at the right time.
Oh yeah,
100%. And in order for it to come in at the right time, you have to have that prior training and understanding of the threat level and what's reasonable, right? So, let's just say we're talking about like that scenario that you brought up with the lady in the bus stop. So that's actually a fantastic one, because unfortunately stuff like that is more than common, right?
Oh yeah.
It's men encroaching on personal boundaries, getting inappropriate, trying to see what they can get away with. And the thing that I liked about what you said is that you automatically put that boundary in by making a bit of a step back, making space, which is exactly what I would do. And I like the way that you flipped it in terms of going, okay, let's get the attention on him so other people are aware. Because I'm not really funny, any form of criminal doesn't want to get caught. Simple as that. So if you're a guy that's regularly going out trying to sexually assault women, funnily enough, you don't want to be caught doing it. So one of the things that you need is a bit of a deterrent. One of those deterrents could be, her boyfriend's going to beat the living shit out of me, okay? Another deterrent might be, there's other people looking around at me now. I've now made a bit of a scene. I don't want to be seen as an assaulter, you know what I mean, as a criminal. I don't want to be seen in that way, because at the end of the day, that could lead to legal action, right? And they don't want to end up in prison. They don't want to end up on any sort of register or anything like that. So,
no, completely.
I think, and this is exactly it. And I think you've got to understand the mind of a criminal and what they're trying to get out of these situations. Now, interestingly, when I was doing a lot of the statistical stuff, and like they're looking into crime statistics, looking into perpetrator statistics, it's very, very common for women, especially in the sexual assault and rape categories, that it's generally somebody that they know. And I think that is one of the biggest misconceptions in women's self-protection. And in general, and you look at like self-defense instructors or like martial arts instructors that teach self-defense, one of the first things they do, they'll be like, so some random guy approaches you and they grab you from behind. Or some guy comes up and he grabs you by the throat. And it's like, it's not going to be some random guy. Like, statistically, it's very unlikely that you're going to have a guy in a hood come up from behind and grab you behind the neck. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a possibility. Like, you can't rule any of this stuff out. However, we need to be teaching self-defense to the majority, right? Of the majority of stuff that's going to happen. So, when you look at the statistics, the number one perpetrator of any sort of crime that's sexual against women is mostly going to be the partner of said woman, or it's going to be an ex-partner. Okay, so they're like the two key demographics of this, right? The issue with that is that, you can talk about that you hit them in the face and you scratch their eyes out and then you do this. The problem is, though, if that's somebody that is in your life and you trust and respect, and you already have closer boundaries with them, in that you're not going to be telling them to leave me alone, stay back, automatically the dynamic completely shifts, and now it becomes a lot more complicated. And simply going, this is what you do physically, isn't enough, because there needs to be all of this prefaced stuff to do with boundary setting, identifying dangerous behaviours, and being able to put solidified boundaries in that are going to stop any of those behaviours turning into an assault or turning into something far, far worse. So, and that was one of the biggest things for me that I think I really wanted to make sure that I put into the seminar when I taught it, was I need the women to leave this seminar thinking about, can I identify behaviours in men that I can use to my advantage to realise whether that person is actually being supportive and is like a trustworthy guy in my life, or is that person just hanging around because they're trying to fuck me? And I know that sounds like that's a brutal way of putting it, but there is a certain group of men, and it's unfortunate, but it's like the friend zone guys that hang around, pretend to be friends for a long period of time, and then eventually they try it on, doesn't go well, and then it ruins the relationship and everything goes wrong. And if women have the skills to identify those behaviours early on, they're far more confident in their boundary setting and their ability to avoid getting into those kind of relationships in the first place. And I think, like you said, like the hard skills are super, super important. But if they have like a really solidified set of soft skills that avoid and prevent, you're far more likely to be safe in the long run, I think. That was kind of like that's kind of like the overview of like the beginning sections of the seminar. It was all very much to do with the identification of threats, the ability to set solid boundaries, and understanding like crime statistics and types of perpetrators. So I thought that was really interesting, and I think one of the biggest things as well was looking at the difference between male violence and female violence. So, most martial artists teach male violence, right? So, like, think about the drills that we do, right? So, first thing we usually do is, like, somebody pushes you and they try and hit you in the head, or they grab you and they try and punch you in the face. And that is very martial arty. You look at, like, old school karate, you look at all of the kind of, like, old traditional forms of martial arts, and I guarantee that they will all follow the basic line of, it is a man attacking a man, and you are dealing with a male-type violence attack. Which there's nothing wrong with, it's just not as suitable for women because it's a totally different ballpark. You've got a totally different kind of perpetrator again. Like, the drunk guy that's pissed off because you spilt his pint isn't the same as the predatory violence you get from a guy that's trying to stalk you and is trying to potentially sexually assault you. They're a different kind of perpetrator and they've got different goals and they're going to go about it in a totally different way. A bit of a question for you then, Pat. Like, based on your experiences of like self-defense, it'd be interesting to see like how we our kind of outlooks on this. When it comes down to like male violence, what are the things that you've seen on a most regular basis?
I think the most common occurrence for let's say male on male violence. It's the pub. It's the very short version of it. Like,
absolutely.
I don't live in an area where there's necessarily a lot of kind of like street brawling, for lack of a better word. But like every time,
rough area around here.
Well, but this is the thing. Every time there's any kind of scuttle about there's been a fight or anything like that. It's never like, there's been a fight outside the supermarket. It's always like somebody kicked off with somebody in the pub, and the fights I've witnessed have been in the four walls of a pub. I haven't seen anybody scrapping on the street. I haven't seen anybody getting chased. I haven't seen anything like that. And I know this is kind of just demographic of my specific area. Like, I'm not gonna say that this is exactly the same everywhere in the world. But my personal experience is it's solely rooted in pubs and bars. The only time I think I've ever been, the only two times, I suppose, I've ever been actually assaulted myself, and I was involved in an altercation, have again been in the pub. And kind of ironically, considering the course of the topic that we're discussing today, but I think it's quite poignant, is they were both over a woman, essentially.
Yeah, classic.
Because the short version of both scenarios, so I suppose in the first version, the young woman was incredibly drunk. Me and a couple of her friends were around. I kind of knew her through these people, and a friend of hers turns to me and says, "Mate, I'm really sorry. I'm fucking hammered myself. Can you help me get this girl home?" Well, we're going. Her boyfriend won't stop calling her, and eventually I just picked up and I'm like, "Hey," because I didn't know who he was at the time. I was like, "Hey, this is so and so's phone. I'm really sorry, but she's absolutely out of her mind right now. She's super drunk. We're just gonna take her home. Kind of, is that okay with whoever this is?" And he goes like, "Oh no, just bring her to my house." I'm like, "Sorry, who is this?" And it's like, "Oh, it's her boyfriend. So it's so and so her boyfriend." And I'm like, "Okay, dude, I'm sorry, but like, she's not in, she needs to be looked after. I'm not saying you can't do that, but in the nicest way, we're 5 minutes from her house and 20 minutes from yours. I'm gonna take her to where her friend and my friend, somebody I trust, says she's gonna be looked after and her mum's there and that kind of thing." So we took her home. And the next time I see him in the pub, he comes up and he's like, "You're a fucking liar. I told you to bring her to my house." And like, he's not angry at her about this. He's angry at me. And it's a really strange demographic of like, he clearly feels strongly about this, but it's not like to the point of physical aggression, but he's not going to bring that physical aggression up with her. He's going to try and bring it up with me. And I will say, soft skills, I just sat there and I said, "Mate, I'm having a drink. I'm not involved. I'm going to stay here and I'm going to finish my drink." And he's going like, "No, you're a fucking pussy. I'm going to come outside and I'm going to smash your head in." And I literally was like, "I told you I'm going to finish my drink. Go outside and I'm going to finish my drink and I'll come and meet you." And I took a long time nursing that drink. I made sure I was sipping it and I was savouring it, and I finished reading the thing I was reading on my phone, and I gave it 10-15 minutes, and when I went out there, whether he cooled off or whether he got frustrated and left or whatever it was, he wasn't there. So that, soft skills on my part. The second instance again was I was out at a disco, because I was cool like that when I was young. I went to all the discos. Disco at the local sports club because Anyway, but again, I was dancing with a couple of people. I was out with some friends. Ended up dancing with this girl. 5 minutes later, this guy grabbed me. And I'm pretty drunk myself at this point, I'm ashamed to admit. But from what I could make out, he was giving it the whole, like, "That's my girl you're dancing with." And again, to my shame, I was very young. I was only about 17, 18 at the time. I thought, I thought I'd give it a go. And I took a swipe at the guy. And bearing in mind, he's holding me. He's with arm's distance. We do these kinds of drills all the time. But I think this is also, this is maybe slightly tangentializing from the point, but I think it's something to take into account of like, I'd had a bit to drink. The guy was touching me. I knew exactly where the guy was. I threw a straight to his head and I missed. Because I didn't think, because he wasn't actually where I thought he was. So that's actually something to point about the hard skills of like, my adrenaline was up, I'd been grabbed, I'd been thrown around, I'd had a lot to drink. In theory, it was a nice clean straight shot to the head, which we've done how many times in training? How many times have we drilled it?
Oh, absolutely.
But I missed. Because I didn't actually know where his head was because I was too drunk. And it kind of resulted in a little bit of a scuffle, and we ended up getting separated and kicked out. Completely accurate. But again, it kind of comes back to this weird thing of like, it's the social dynamic of he didn't take that up with his partner or his girlfriend or his fling or whatever they were to each other. He didn't again take that with him, he took that up with me. Because in his head, it is not socially acceptable to be seen having an argument with a young woman in the middle of a disco, but two fellas sorting something out over a woman, strangely, actually a lot more socially acceptable. Yeah. So that's kind of, I don't think either of us have got the time or the energy to get into some long-winded foray into the social constructs of the United Kingdom and why that is and isn't okay. But I think but this is the thing, to kind of pull it back to your question, like, it's solely around these kind of social influences.
Yeah.
There's no fighting on the, there's not really kind of fighting on the street. There's not really anything other than that. It's just a case of people get a drink in them. People think I'm behind the closed doors of a pub maybe, or I'm out of the back of these venues, which are by design nice and quiet, nice and isolated.
Well, yep.
And that's where the male on male violence that I've seen in real time, in real life, have occurred. And
So
no, you carry.
no, no, no. So sorry, just because you said that, and it's interesting. So you've just gone. It happens socially, and it happens usually in some form of public space. Usually when alcohol's involved, right? That was literally pretty much word for word what you could have said in terms of like those situations. Right?
That's very much the crux of the point. Yeah.
Absolutely right. So this is where sometimes for women's self-protection, the dynamic shifts massively, because there doesn't always need to be that social aspect, and there doesn't always need to be the alcohol aspect either. In that the number one thing that women will face is going to be domestic abuse. Now, domestic abuse is massively different to that of any form of public social violence. As you've already initiated a relationship with this person, and you're already in a position where, especially if you're living together, it can become incredibly difficult to then deal with said problem. Now, obviously, there's a lot of support lines, and there's a lot of different places that you can go to contact people that can give you a hand getting out of those relationships and finding ways in which to keep yourself safe. And I'll tell you what we'll do at the end of the episode. Once we've filmed all this and we've recorded it, we'll make sure that we put some of the helplines underneath in the description, so that everybody knows where to go if they need to help other people or if they need them help themselves.
Great idea, man. Yeah.
But like like I said though, the domestic abuse side of things is massively different, and it is skewed massively towards women being the victim of that from male partners. Now, because of that, all the things that you just talked about, like the de-escalation and stuff, is not as effective, because you're already a target of that crime, and you're behind closed doors. You don't always have the witness perception kind of like thing, like the sneezing on them, like you talked about. Where, like, cool example for the situation you were in, that the lady was in rather. But in terms of like being at home in your safe space, this is the space that you're supposed to be able to relax, be able to feel like completely safe in the world. And this is the place in which you're really at most risk.
I was going to say, arguably the place where you are not in any way, shape, or form switched on. You are not prepared. You are not prepared for
Absolutely.
Assailants and attackers and people bursting through the windows. You are, for all intents and purposes, at your most rest and your most safe in these spaces.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and you shouldn't have to be on high alert in your own home, but unfortunately, it is the case for a lot of people. And because of that, we have to start looking at, okay, how do we deal with domestic abuse then? Now, unfortunately, the number one thing that we can teach is the preventative stuff of, once again, going back to the idea of identifying the dangerous behaviours, identifying certain traits in your partners that might kind of lead into other more more dangerous behaviours. So Jamie Clubb, who hopefully we're going to have on the show sometime in this season, we will. He always talks about what he calls insidious assault, and it's a really interesting term because it's like a slowly building set of behaviours and actions that slowly get more progressively worse over time. Now, if you can identify the early ones, you can put those boundaries in early and hopefully protect yourself against further issues. However, if you're not made aware of those behaviours, or you choose to ignore them because of all of the good things you get from the relationship, then you can get maybe a few months down the line, maybe even years down the line, without really realising that what you're. I don't want to use the word letting, because let's be very, very clear, nothing is ever the victim's fault in any form of violence, any form of domestic abuse. However, there are definitely preventative things that we can do, or as well, women can do more so, to help avoid getting into these really tough spots and avoid the abuse that can be put on many women. So you don't ever want it to get to that stage where it becomes violent, where it becomes physically abusive. And to be quite honest, like a lot of women are out there will just go, as soon as their partner starts showing signs of like verbal abuse, emotional abuse, forcing codependency, going, you can't live without me and stuff like that, then automatically, some of them will be like, all right, what, fuck you then, mate. I don't want to be with you. You're a fucking nutter. Get out of my house. I don't want you anywhere near me. And that's a perfectly fine response. Get them out of that stage. However, there is the other side of that where if you're not very confident in yourself, you might have a lower self-esteem. You might not have the the skill set to be able to kind of like set those boundaries and tell somebody, no, you can't do this. Like, no, don't. You're not allowed to do this to me. This is bang out of order. You need to get out of my life. Then it can bleed into these more serious things. Now, the most unfortunate thing is about domestic abuse, in my opinion, is that I guarantee that every single person has an experience with somebody else or themselves of domestic abuse. And I'm obviously not going to call out specific examples here, but I'm sure the same with you, Pat. I'm sure there's people that that have gone through domestically abusive relationships or emotionally abusive in any way. And
it's a really tragic thing, because in so many of the cases that have kind of sprung to my mind as you've started kind of bringing the point of, the majority of these people are actually still together in some facet, which just baffles me. I mean, I touch wood, I'm lucky enough to have never experienced domestic violence or abuse in that respect, but hearing, you kind of, and I think this is also a strange point. I would also argue, maybe for the statistical side, but also for the kind of self-protection bias, is we hear this one story of this one event and we're like, oh my god, that's crazy. But what we don't actually compute is for like that one person, that is one bad event in weeks, months, years of being with this person, a lifetime with this person. And like, it's so easy in the human mind to go like, oh, it's just a blip. That's just oh no, they just had a bad day, or anything like that. I was reading this really interesting article actually where a woman was saying, she's not necessarily a self-protection practitioner, but she was basically saying like, how do you feel safe in your daily life? I was reading this article, and this woman wasn't necessarily a self-protection coach as much as she was kind of a dating life coach. Somebody who basically was like, how do you stay safe in the world of kind of like online dating, meeting strangers, that kind of thing? Because anybody can be hiding behind a Tinder profile, was kind of the short version of the article.
Wow, yes.
And something that she said, which I thought was actually a really interesting point, because I've never thought to do this, but I would actually, it's one of the things where like, I would almost challenge the people listening to go like, how would you react if you were in the situation where basically you meet somebody, you have proof that they're real, however you feel you can get it, anything like that, you're happy to meet with them, and you say like, okay, we're gonna go and get first date, let's think of something really nice and classy. You're gonna go and get KFC as an example. Obviously, for the people who are listening, who are in the midst of finding dates, don't take them to KFC on the first date. But like,
what is wrong with
you? I mean, unless they have said, I really fancy some fried chicken tonight. But like, go to like Los Pollos or something. Don't go to KFC anyway.
Don't you ever not take me on a KFC date, Patrick?
Okay. Me and Jack have been in a relationship for a very long time, so this is a different. I'm just gonna use the example of like, we're gonna meet at KFC at 7:00, right?
Yeah.
Don't take them like 5 or 7, but like at some point in the day, she suggests just go like, hey, I know we're keeping things casual. I really don't like fried chicken. Do you mind if we go to the McDonald's instead? And you see their reaction, because if straight away they go like, no, we're going to KFC, then like that immediate reaction is like, okay, why are you so insistent on going to KFC? If the answer is like, oh, I haven't been in a real, I just haven't been in a really long time, or I've done this, or like using the example of like they've actually booked a nice restaurant, they go like, I've had to really beg, borrow, and steal to get this reservation. You go like, oh, okay, cool, I'll maybe I'll try something. But the whole idea behind the sort of little social test, and I know it's kind of always a bit of a dicey one when you're kind of being asked to test, quote unquote, a prospective partner. But the purpose of the exercise is to go like, how open to your wants and feelings and boundaries is this person? Because if you say like, oh, I'm really sorry, I actually got told a couple of weeks ago I've got a really bad gluten intolerance. I can't go to KFC and have anything but the fries. Do you mind if we go somewhere where they've got nice gluten-free options? As an example, I myself am gluten intolerant. It's a conversation I've had to have with my partner and my friends before. And it's the thing of like the right people will go like, "Oh, I'm really sorry, I didn't realize." Yes, of course. Let me get on my phone and I'll have a Google at some nice restaurants to do gluten-free options. Okay, we'll go here. But if they're like, "Oh no, but I want to go to KFC," immediately your wants and your feelings and your boundaries are not being respected by this person, which straight away is something you should be noticing.
Yes.
It's kind of,
Yeah.
again, not everybody is that socially adept. I completely understand that. Not everybody has the confidence to so purposefully challenge their partner or their prospective partner or even a prospective friend in that kind of way. But it's kind of something that came to my mind when you were talking about kind of boundaries within your home and your household and the romantic relationship you share. It might not even be a romantic relationship. It might be a roommate or a college roommate or something like that. And it's really important that like these people understand that there are boundaries that you are going to set, and it's really important for you to make sure they are respected. This isn't your. I mean, don't get me wrong. This isn't your opportunity to then put your romantic partner in a little, 5x5 box of like you can't leave this space because then you're affecting my boundaries. But in the conversation we are having around self-defense practices and self-protection practices, especially in your own home where you are going to feel safe and you're not going to be thinking about it, it's really important that you make sure that like, are my boundaries still being looked after? Does this person still view me as a human with autonomy, or are they used to me in a way that could be dangerous? Is this indicative of a behavior that will not make me safe? And is this indicative of a behavior that could be a precursor to something far worse? It's a really difficult thing because
there's such a blurred line, isn't there?
Yeah.
There's such a blurred line between like the two things, this is just one of the things that like I really noticed about when I was doing the seminar. And one of the biggest questions were basically like, oh, but what if this boundary makes them uncomfortable? What if me saying this makes it worse? What if it escalates it further and stuff? And it was like one of those things where I was like, there is a lot of nuance in this, and the difficulty is it really is like a case to case kind of situation, and you have to just be able to gauge and understand based on the kind of stimulus that you're given, right? And I think. So one of the interesting ones specifically, I know this is getting a little bit more onto the physical stuff, but we were talking about the physical boundary setting, and we were talking about like Jeff Thompson's principle of defense. I really like it. I like to use it. I teach it because I think it's simple, but it makes a lot of sense and it works. So anyway, we have like the very soft version of it in which we're just like using the hands as a boundary. We're not necessarily doing anything to anybody, but we're keeping them up. We're thinking about how the talking with the hands can help, how it can put that kind of space in between you and the other person, especially if you're, you don't know them, you're a little bit concerned about their behavior, they might be just getting a little bit too touchy, a little bit too close. And, I said, one of the ladies was like, so we were talking about like, the escalation of it. So we were going from they're being a little bit inappropriate, they might be getting a little bit too close. At this stage, we're just kind of talking things, we're keeping the hands up. And then I said there's a point in which, this becomes unacceptable. It could be when their behavior changes slightly and they become slightly more like forceful. It could be when they start really encroaching on your personal boundaries. But at some point, you're going to need to be quite forceful with that hand, and you need to be like, no, stay back. No, that's enough. You don't come any closer. And it was interesting because one of the ladies from the seminar, she said, wouldn't that escalate it further? Like, what would happen next? And it's like, it was one of the things that I said to her. I was like, well, at the end of the day, like, this person has already escalated it, and they're already trying to encroach on your boundaries. By you solidifying your space, yes, I see where you're coming from. Like, yes, that person might now be a little bit pissed off that they haven't been able to get away with what they're trying to get away with. However, you've just drawn attention to it. So very similarly, like what you talked about earlier, if you verbally confirmed it too, saying, "Hey, no, you don't do that. That's bang out of order. Don't come near me." There might be other people around in the space that go, "Hey, what's going on over there? Like, is she all right?" So first of all, that witness perception thing comes in. You might have the help of the other people, but equally, it's like it's already escalated to that level. Like, what's the alternative that you please him and try and be kind and try and be, accommodating, and then you end up getting sexually assaulted or harassed just because you don't want to hurt the other person's feelings. And there was a quote that I really liked, and it was like, you need to be non-apologetic in your like self-defense. It's like, I would rather offend somebody than end up getting hurt or end up getting assaulted. You know, at the end of the day, I'd rather offend somebody's feelings. Like, my safety is more important than your feelings. You know, it's pretty simple as it gets.
Completely. And I think that's really indicative of, again, the kind of social aspect of, like, I think it's really strange how, like, and if you don't feel it's the same, then please jump in and correct me. But I think there is, again, this real onus on female presenting people to be the kind of the mediators and the peacemakers in a scenario. And it's almost like, if you're a bloke and you square up with somebody on the street and there's kind of a verbal confrontation, you part ways, there's kind of a thing of like, oh, well, at least it didn't diverge into violence. And there's kind of almost this weird saving grace of like, well, at least they didn't kick the shit out of each other. But then if you have the same thing where like a woman is being assaulted by a man, and it's like, she starts, you know, even if it's the perfect self-protective language, even if it's the full, you know, get back, you know, I don't want this, don't come near me, she's being very affirming, she's not being apologetic, she's not being pejorative, you know, she's also not kind of shouting and swearing at the guy, which I'm not saying isn't fine. Like, if you need to tell the guy to fuck off to get him to go away, then you tell him, like. But it's almost that thing of like, it's then the kind of social aspect of like, oh, well, did you see so and so just went crazy at that guy on the street the other day? And it's that kind of language of like, women are seen socially, they need to be quiet and demure and subservient, and they need to not, they, you know, as soon as they start making space for their boundaries, oh, she's being too pushy, she's being overbearing, she's going crazy. And again, it's this really damaging social core that is, I think, really kind of one of the things at the heart of the conversation of women's self-protection, self-defense. Because there are so many stories, and I like you said, I defy anybody to ask one of their female presenting friends, have you ever been in a situation where this has happened? Every one of them will say yes. It's not a case of, oh, they'll know somebody. Every single one of them will have said, well, this guy made me feel uncomfortable, or this guy touched me in a way I didn't appreciate, or I got this. And it's like, it's a really damaging fact. And it was mind-boggling for me as a male presenting person to realize, like, okay, yeah, I've been in a couple of scrapes. I've had some guys start on me in the pub, but like, that's really mild compared to some of the stories I hear from my female presenting friends, and it like blows my mind. And again, I think a part of it is predominantly the social construct of like, women don't feel like they can be heard because they're going to get called crazy, or they're going to get called overbearing, or they're going to get called overreactive, or they're going to get called hysterical. And it's just like, if I called you up and I was just like, mate, you'll never guess, like, some guy just tried to start on me in the street. He came up to me and he was shouting, and you'd be like, oh mate, that's crazy. But like, you know, what did you do? But it's kind of, I'm not saying like this is a you personally thing, but it's kind of like, I've heard stories where a friend, you know, a female presenting person has called up a friend of theirs, and they've gone, oh, this guy came up to me in the street and he was just touching me in a really way. And like, they've had people they trust go, are you sure? It's like, of course I'm sure. It just happened. And it's like, oh, are you sure you weren't overreacting? And it's like, no, he was touching me in a way I didn't appreciate. I told him as such, and I asked him to leave me alone. And it's just a really, really damaging thing, because on a mental level, you feel like you're never in the right.
That's the problem. And yeah, genuinely, now you say that, that was one of the things that, you know, the women that I was, you know, we were doing the seminar for, like, some of them, not all of them, but like some of them were certainly like, you know, but I don't want to be seen as the bad person, I don't want to do anything wrong. And it's like, okay, well, you're looking at it slightly in the wrong way, because you're putting the situation and what happens afterwards as a priority, and your safety is like a secondary thing. And I think that can be quite detrimental, because it's all well and good. Like, there's nothing wrong with worrying about the consequences and being aware of what certain actions will cause. However, your number one priority is your safety, and if you're putting that lower on the list, you're automatically letting all this other stuff potentially happen to you because you're too worried about consequences or too worried about what other people will think. And like you say, though, that does come down to a social problem. It's not something that's like inherently a female thing. It's something that is kind of like society is kind of like naturally formed to do, unfortunately, and this is the exact same issue why we have issues with underreporting of domestic abuse, underreporting of sexual assaults, underreporting of rape. It's because women are worried about the consequences of afterwards. Like, they don't want to ruin that person's life. Like, like we talked about, right? You look at like stories of women that get raped by their friends. Well, friends, quote unquote. They're not your friends. They're bastards, is probably the nicest way of putting it. But they don't report it because they're like, oh, I don't want to ruin his life because he's still my friend. It's like, well, no, I'm sorry, but he's lost that fucking privilege. He's just done this to you. He's no longer. You don't no longer worry about what the fuck he's got to, what he's got to deal with. At the end of the day, he's done this like horrible thing to you, and for your own sanity and for the other potential victims that might be subjected to him, like it's better that you go out and report it. And I know it might be a scary thing to do, and I know there's a lot of confidence that comes with that, especially if it's somebody that is in your life permanently. It is a very, very difficult thing to do, and once again, like, there's no blaming of any victims' decisions in this, because it is a difficult thing to do. However, I think the more people we have that can come forward and have the confidence and the willpower to just go, you know what, no, I'm not going to let these bastards keep getting away with it, the more we should end up with a society of women that just feel safer, because they know they've got a voice, they know they've got an ability to go out there and live their lives as they want, without worry of like, I'm going to be judged if I do this, or I'm not going to be listened to if this happens. And this was one of the key points that I mentioned in the seminar. Is that you've got to be unapologetic in your actions. You have to be confident to know that, no, fuck him. I'm not going to worry about his feelings in this. At the end of the day, he's this person has committed this crime. Right. They've even if they were somebody that's in my life, they deserve to be dealt with. They deserve to be called out so that other people aren't going to be subjected to their behaviours. But also, if we start seeing, especially more women in this space, push that narrative, and actually men too, because men do have a massive responsibility with this too, which I'm going to get to in a minute. We will have a little talk about that. Yeah, so I think it's a really important thing.
It's so important. It's so important for men in the situations and outside the situations to actually be advocates for completely destroying that kind of 100%. Culture. And I'm not. This isn't a kind of a point of like, well, a man's opinion means more, but it's like that is one of the key tools in making sure that these women do feel heard, and people who do, because it's not just women, but obviously that's the topic we're discussing today. But it's like these women who do suffer physical abuse, domestic abuse, sexual abuse. It's so important for other men to stand up and point an accusatory finger and say, no, he performed those acts, he did so knowing they were wrong. There was a real point of like I think it was some kid in America who was on track for the Olympics or something, and somebody brought a charge against him for sexual assault, and it's like the papers reported of just like so and so was tried and charged with sexual assault on the whatever thing, and then the next headline was like, the Olympic level swimmer, and it's like, no, he's not an Olympic level swimmer, he's just been charged with rape, he's a rapist. Why are you like, oh, but he could have gone to the Olympics? Yeah, he also could have chosen not to rape somebody. Like, he doesn't get to live on the past laurels of what he's good at. If, you take fucking Fred West, you don't go like, the builder was charged. He's not a builder, he's a murderer.
It's true. It's very, very true.
Like,
yeah.
That's I mean, I know that's kind of, I'm kind of going off topic again, but it's, the culture around it is so damaging.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree. And like you say, the social aspects of it, in terms of like the male side of things and the things that men can do, is very, very important too. Now, I just want to mention this because I think, based on a lot of things that have happened recently, there is this. So, okay, we're going to use adolescence as an example for this, if you don't mind. But there was a massive talking point after adolescence about male violence from like teenage years, and the way that young boys have been kind of like brainwashed by the media and by people like Andrew Tate and other like various influences in that regard, that they're supposed to be helping the alpha male kind of stuff, all of that stuff, right? And I just want to be very clear whenever we talk about the self-protection stuff, especially when we're talking about women. I want to be very, very clear that this isn't a fuck men, all men are bad, fuck the lot of them, they're all awful, because that's definitely not what I'm trying to put across with this. However, one of the things that we need to really make sure as guys is that we also have the courage and the confidence to call out the behaviours of our friends and call out the behaviours of the people that are around us. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to stand there in the pub going, "He's a rapist!" Obviously, like, that's crazy. But there needs to be that kind of confidence in order to go, listen, like, the behaviour that you just did, mate, like, let's just call it a micro behaviour. Let's just say it's a misogynistic comment. Not like a stupid joke, but like something that is like genuinely like, okay, that's bang out of order, mate. It's like, you can't say that because I can see that you mean it. That's not okay. You need to be able to call out that behaviour so that person is like, okay, no shit, I know that that's not right. Those guys did not respond well to that. That's not okay. I shouldn't be doing this. Because if those micro behaviours are dealt with, hopefully they won't bleed into something more serious down the line, because you're nipping it in the bud before it can kind of blossom. I know that's a really bad word, but blossom into something that's a lot worse. But kind of likewise with that, you've also got to look at the fact that we also have the responsibility as men to make sure that we are trustworthy and supportive to the women around us in our lives, and make sure they see us as somebody that they can rely on and trust when it comes down to these kind of situations. Because it's unfortunately inevitable that a lot of people that you will know at some point or another, especially women, will go through some sort of sexual harassment, some sort of sexual assault, or they will be friends with somebody that has gone through it. So being an ally in that respect, and being able to kind of show that shit, we're not all like this. Some men actually, we do care about the safety of women, and we're willing to do what we can to try and make sure you feel more supported and listened to is probably the best one. Then we need to make sure that we're actively doing those things, and we're not just kind of like passively sat back going, "Oh no, but I do think that." It's like, okay, yeah, you can think it, mate, but you need to be making sure that you're showing it too. And I think the last kind of big point about the kind of like the male side of things is, if women are able to see what trustworthy, genuinely good guys are like, they are more likely to be able to identify the bad behaviours in men, and they're more likely going to be able to identify when something is turning into something that's dangerous, because they can use hopefully you, as a reference point of like, no, this is how a man should act, and this is how they should be treating women, and this is how they should be ensuring how I'm safe. And one of the points that was brought up in the seminar was, one of the ladies that came was talking about like, the role model she's had in her life. And she said that, it's been difficult for her because, she hasn't necessarily had the best male role models. So throughout her life, she's really struggled with identifying bad behaviours in men, because she hasn't ever seen what a man should be like, if you see what I mean. So I think that's a really, that's very encompassing of like the kind of like whole thing, is that like this is a female issue, but it's just as much got to do with the way that men act and the way that men call out each other in order to deal with the issue more appropriately, and be able to kind of make a bit of a change. So have you got any other points on that, Pat, in terms of like, the male side of things and that kind of
I think to be honest, I do just want to kind of reiterate my point of like, if you are male or male presenting, and be it that you've kind of found us through the club, or you're an existing self-protection practitioner, or even you're just a fan of what we're talking about, it is exponentially important that you speak out if you see this kind of behavior going on. If you've got a mate who makes even if it's the little things, like you've got a mate who makes jokes that are a little bit, a little bit too raunchy, and you can see that they make people uncomfortable or anything like that, you are not the bad guy for speaking up and saying this behavior is not okay. Because there is, on the face of it, there is a reason why women's self-defense is a completely separate topic to self-defense. There is a reason why we're doing this episode specifically. There is a reason why Jack was approached by members of our community to teach these techniques and these practices to people.
Yeah.
Because I am exponentially less likely to need to use my self-defense practices than the people who attended Jack's seminar on the very short face of it. If that's this thing of like, if the really sad thing is like, as somebody who is male, if I'm out on the street and I'm keeping to my awareness, there's a very good chance that nobody's gonna try and follow me home. Nobody's gonna try and take me out. If I'm at the pub, which I very seldom am these days, I know the warning signs of it's getting a bit tense in here. I should probably go. But this kind of very small, very subtle, everyday violence. I'm gonna call it how it is. These kind of very small acts of violence that happen on a daily basis, and they do happen to people that you know, and they do happen in ways that it is really difficult to take seriously. If you are, from a legal perspective, it's really, really difficult to sift through these things if it's just a one-on-one he said, she said argument. Third-party evidence is so important in these cases, and if you want to talk about in legal sense, in the cases that get brought into court, third-party testimony is really important, because then it's not just the argument of this man and this woman arguing. It's really, really important that it's really, really important on your everyday social ideals as well. Because if you have somebody in your life who you might consider a friend, but he makes the odd joke every now and again, he gets a bit handsy when he's had a drink, he does behaviors that you wouldn't feel comfortable doing, then it's important that you speak to these people and you speak up and you say, what you're doing is a little bit not okay, man. And if they'll take it on the chin and they'll say, yep, fair enough, I'll try and get a handle on that, then that's a good thing. But if they start getting confrontational, that is a clear sign that they don't think they're doing anything wrong. And that is the root cause of so much of the behaviours that me and Jack have seen, and Jack has researched for his seminar, and I've seen in my own research on the topic in preparation for this episode. It starts out as the smallest thing, but these small things go unchallenged and they grow into much uglier problems.
100%.
Having said that, Jack, do you have any closing statements?
So, as a closing thought, I think really, really important. I think it's just kind of like a good conclusion, because I think it's really important that we, summarize this in a way where, people feel like they've got something to take away. And I would say the number one thing is making sure that you have the willpower and the confidence to report, to set solid boundaries with people, and make sure that you're able to identify dangerous behaviours. Now, obviously, we haven't really gone into the specifics of this today. Obviously, this episode could genuinely have been like 4 hours, 5 hours, because, we could have gone into the, specific behaviours. We could have gone into specific events and specific scenarios and stuff like that. But this episode would have been far too long, and it would have been there'd have been too much information to take in. So I think, when you look at it, it's all within those kind of like basic skills of like I just listed, but also closing thoughts as well for the men that are, that listen to this podcast, just being able to kind of like look at this from a woman's point of view and understand how scary it can be, knowing that, generally women are going to be biologically not as able to deliver hard strikes and be able to set physical boundaries with people because of the natural biological differences between men and women. Therefore, there is going to be this level of intimidation that we cause without us really realizing. And I think when you look at it from that point of view, you want to make sure that you are not presenting yourself as somebody that is intimidating to women and scary to women, because it's likely that, they're not going to feel as comfortable. You want to make sure that you're somebody that is open, you're supportive, and you're able to also, like Pat said, call out the behaviours that you see in your friends to ensure that we're stopping as many of these behaviours as possible. So, all it takes is you to make one comment to a friend, and you never know, that could potentially lead to that person not doing something that they shouldn't have done, and somebody's life being ruined down the line. Aside from that, I think it'd be really important that we're going to make sure we put some stuff in the description. Like I said earlier, we're going to put the contact number for domestic abuse and reporting rape and sexual assault. So if anybody listening in feels like they need to use that, they can. Additionally though, guys, like normal, if you want to get in contact with me, you can find me at Cotswold Karate School on Instagram or on our website www.cotswoldkarateschool.com. And Pat, where can we find you if we want to contact you?
As always, you can find me at Good Medicine Martial Artist, or as Jack said, please feel free to contact us through the official Armchair Combatives Instagram page if you want to get updates on the show, or you want to get involved in any way that you can. If you simply want more information on the topics discussed today, contacting us through the page or contacting Jack directly are also both really good options. But other than that, Jack, this has been a great conversation. We've covered a lot of good ground.
Very interesting.
And I'm very keen to get with you on the next one.
Absolutely. We'll see you soon.
See you soon, mate. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.